In tonight's panel, Danielle Pletka, Senior Vice President of the American Enterprise Institute and an MSNBC contributor, David Ignatius, columnist at The Washington Post, also an MSNBC contributor, and Carol Lee, national political reporter, who doesn't just contribute here, she works here full-time for NBC News. Carol, thank you. Mr. Ignatius, you wrote about this morning, so I'll let you tee off here. They feel like let's have two conversations. Danny and I were talking about this in the green room. Try to have a conversation about the issues with NATO and subtract Trump's personality. But let me also start the conversation this way. Why is the president doing this so publicly?
I think this was the diplomatic version of trash talking. I think he has convinced himself that destabilizing friends, adversaries, people in our political culture works for him. I think he every time we go, oh my gosh, he didn't do that, I think he probably thinks this is going the way I want. I think he went to Brussels determined to pick a fight. He sat down at breakfast and bam, you know, these very intemperate, sharp comments, because they called Germany captive of Russia. It's extraordinary. But I think he did it to put people off balance. The formal agreements seemed to be exactly what you would have predicted. The private meetings were calming and nice anodyne statements afterwards. My question is, what does he think he gets out of this? You know, he disrupts everything. To what end? Does he think this gives him leverage with Putin? That strikes me as a completely crazy.
Carol, you cover him you cover this White House full time. What's the? Sometimes it's only his calculus. There is no White House calculus.
I think that's absolutely right. And I think that one point that you made is you're onto something in terms of, I think he relishes in this, but it also plays really well with his base. And if you're a Trump supporter, one of the diehard Trump supporters, and you see the president over there, you know, confronting the Europeans who, you know, many members of the president's base feel are lecturing and, you know, have been taking a siesta while the U.S. carries the burden of a bunch of things in the world, then you like what you see. And so in that sense, you know, he is rewarded. I think the question is, what is the long game? And short-term politically, maybe it helps him. But long-term, you know, I think we don't know what the consequences of this are and the way he's treating our allies. And, you know, whether those consequences show up before the 2020 election remains to be seen. And so will he actually, and what will they be? And will he actually have any?
Danny, it seems clear to me he didn't even have a vision of what he wants NATO to be. This is what he tweeted today. What good is NATO if Germany is paying Russia billions of dollars for gas and energy? Why are there only 5 out of 29 countries that have met their commitment? The U.S. is paying for Europe's protection, then loses billions on trade, must pay 2% of GDP immediately, not by 2025. Does he have a vision? I don't think he has a vision for what what he wants NATO to be.
Okay, so let's do what you first asked, which is let's separate this out. Okay, you said rightly, previous presidents, not just Barack Obama, but all the way back for years, and we could even say
pay more, right?
Right, as have successive NATO secretaries general. Okay, the Europeans are not just not paying more and more. Often they're paying less and less, and when they're paying more and more, it's so slowly, in the case of Germany, that they're getting up to 2% in 2025. That's really not what we call a meaningful increase. So if Donald Trump had said this privately, in the back room, without the videos, we all would have said, hey, you know, presidents have been telling you guys this. Come on, what are you doing? The problem was the relishing the fight. The problem was the tone. The problem was the way he delivered the message. And I think the man thinks to himself, my hallmark is I'm not politically correct. And that's what people love about me. I'm going to tell you the way it is. Okay.
The anger at Merkel seems, like I said, I had a foreign diplomat say, the president seems obsessed with Merkel, David.
He does. I think part of it is a resentment of German success. Germany's trade surplus is extraordinary. I think it is. I think one thing that I've come to think about Donald Trump is that we misinterpret him if we see him as the young, art of the deal, the guy who was on top of the world. The Donald Trump we're dealing with is the guy who nearly went bankrupt, who's scarred and wounded and has lots of resentments. And I think you see this play out in foreign policy. He tries to destabilize, to weaken the adversary, to get a deal. But these are not big deals that last. They didn't in his business life. So, the thing with Merkel, I think he sees her for some reason as threatening. He sees her as a Barack Obama holder. Anything.
That's what I think it is. I think it's the Obama holdover.
Obama,
Well,
but it's not.
she's also she's the leader of all of this, and so he's going to go after the top. But yes, I mean, it's no secret they were very close.
But hang on a second. You can't just single out Donald Trump. Again, let's separate the fact and the man. Angela Merkel is one of the least popular leaders in Europe. She's unpopular inside her own coalition. That's number one. She has angered.
So is President
Right.
Trump's not exactly popular in his
Okay,
country either.
well,
I mean, if we're going to go down those lines, I think the only popular leader right now is, I guess it would be.
Barely Macron.
Yeah, barely. No, I would maybe go with the
40,
Italy guy right now,
40%,
barely,
yeah,
for about a day. Yeah,
Right, not
anyway.
the PM, but the Interior Minister.
Actually, Trudeau
right.
in Canada of the G7 might be the.
He's
Anyway.
not that popular with me either. But seriously, Merkel isn't that popular in Europe. She opened the door to what a lot of people consider to be the most serious refugee crisis since World War II. They blame, rightly or wrongly, they blame her for that. And as far as Germany and Russia, I gotta say, Donald Trump is totally wrong about what the meaning of NATO and the purpose of NATO is. But as far as Germany's attitude towards Russia and the Nord Stream project that Donald Trump was talking about, buying gas.
By the way, Joe
from
Biden didn't like that thing. I mean,
No
the
kidding.
Obama admit, right? I mean, David.
Spot on.
So the Nord Stream, Germany's dependence on Russian energy has bothered people for a long time, and I think Trump was right
Well,
to
Gerhard Schroeder's involvement, it's like his personal involvement, a former, has been very
He works for
stinky.
Gazprom.
Been very
One
stinky.
of the really telling comments today, I thought, was when Merkel said, apropos of this comment that Germany's captive of Russia, I've lived in a Germany that was captive of Russia. I grew up with that. And you could see the resentment she felt at Donald Trump talking about her free, united Germany as a pawn of a country that she as a child escaped from. Anyway, I found that offensive.
Carol, Mike Pompeo, there was sort of, on Earth 2, this is what he said, what any U.S. Secretary of State would have said in the last 40 years about NATO. This is what he tweeted today. NATO is the most successful alliance in history. All NATO allies have committed to extending this success through increased defense spending, deterrence and defense, and fighting terrorism. Weakness provokes, strength and cohesion protects. This remains our bedrock belief. There you go, Mike Pompeo, doing what a Secretary of State's supposed to do.
This is the story of the Trump administration, though. There's the president and what he says, and then there's people around him and what they say. And they have traditionally, whether it's, the Secretary of Defense, James Mattis, or Secretary of State, they say what everybody expects and wants to hear from the U.S. when it comes to foreign policy, by and large. And, I think that the question of substance that you were talking about, whether there's a substantive change versus the rhetoric, if you're trying to latch on to something and you're a European leader, you're looking at the Secretary of State and what they're saying and trying to focus on the substance and in terms of rather than so much the president's rhetoric.
By the way, isn't it already now a done deal? NATO's a disaster, Danny, and the Putin summit, by comparison, will look like a chummy affair.
Oh, God, I really hope not.
That's what's
number
being
one.
set up.
Yeah, no, I really hope that that's not true. But look, NATO needs investment. NATO needs investment not just from the U.S. president. It needs investment from our European allies. It needs purpose. We need to agree on the kinds of investments that we need to make and the kinds of things that we're doing in a world in which the Soviet Union has been done for a long time. Donald Trump was not just wrong that it's only about Russia, but he wasn't wrong that it's not clear what NATO's entire purpose is other than to be an alliance. It's kind of us. But who's them? The them is an alliance that didn't exist that stopped existing 30 years ago.
To Eastern Europe, the them is still Russia, though, David. The Eastern European members of NATO.
So at bottom, NATO is about the credibility of America's commitment to defend Europe in a crisis where the adversary would be now Russia before the Soviet Union. And
what about Hungary?
The credibility of that commitment becomes less and less plausible, I think, to Europeans. The further down this road Donald Trump goes, you can say, well, he's just trying to razz him, just destabilizing him. He's raising the same issues people did before. But I think increasingly in European minds, the idea that the United States would be there for them is diminishing.
But that's
once
just
that
rhetoric.
goes, well, don't you
think the president's base now will carry this anti-NATO fervor forward?
I don't know whether they will. I hope they won't. I think we agree the president was irresponsible. But I also think that it is vitally important that we understand understand that NATO is not confronting the crisis within its midst. The only Muslim country, or the largest Muslim country in NATO, Turkey, which is increasingly becoming a dictatorship, Russian style. The drift towards authoritarianism in former communist states inside NATO. These are things that NATO needs to confront as well.
Each of those things, you could argue Donald Trump is abetting. Who was he walking with?
Was it Barack Obama who sent troops to the border in Eastern Europe to protect our allies from the Russians, or was it Donald Trump? Was it Barack Obama who agreed to arm the Ukrainians, or was it Donald Trump? I hate being put in the position of defending Donald Trump, but those are facts.
Yeah, but it's also a fact that the Trump and Trump supporters are encouraging these nationalist movements in Europe, in Eastern Europe, that are increasingly dangerous to NATO and to the European Union. I mean, that's also a fact.
I don't agree.
I'm only going to pause this conversation, I promise. Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel, so thank you. Now do me a favor, subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Beat the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, you don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP, and the Meet the Press mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.